Hey everybody, it's Greg, Good Cemeterian in Minnesota. We're getting ready to pour a new concrete base, a slotted base for a tabular style marble monument. So let's take a look at what we got going. So we've got our form, and actually we've got two forms. We've got our perimeter form and then our cavity form, because what we're going to do is, we got one over here. We're going to try and recreate or make another one of these. I call them a slotted base. So it's a concrete slab with a slot or cavity in the middle to accept the marble monuments. So this one we're getting ready to work on is for Mary Truman. It stands about 46 and a half, or it used to stand. Right now it's laying on the ground. 2 inches thick, 18 and 5/8 wide. So I make my forms, my cavity forms, I add 1/4 of an inch to, or in this case a 1/2 inch, to the length and 1/2 inch to the width. So what I've used here is basically 2 pieces of decking, 5/4 inch decking, and I've got a piece of 1/2 inch plywood in the middle. Initially I put screws in to hold it all together. I run it through my circular saw to make sure it's the correct width, same width as my we're using 2x6 dimensional lumber, so 5.5 inches. And then I tape it all up with, in this case, Tyvek or packing tape, and then I go ahead and remove the screws. And the reason I remove the screws is, I don't think we'll have an issue now, or I learned the hard way, is one time I didn't get the form out, and there wasn't any tape on it. It was all screwed together. I couldn't get it out. Basically, I had to chisel out and destroy the form, the cavity form. So we've got it all. I've got some marks on the base to let me know, I've got it all equidistant around the edges. So we're getting ready to mix up. I got about 2.5 bags of concrete in the wheelbarrow, and so we'll add some water to that, mix it up, pour it in, and we'll see what happens. Okay, we've got about 2.5 bags concrete already in the form. I've tamped it down just a little bit or lightly with this 2x4. I've rechecked the measurements to make sure that the form hasn't moved. Now, later on, after we're done leveling this off, screeding it, doing finish work, in order to get that form out and to keep it loose, I'll add a couple of lag screws in there, 2 or 4, and basically create handles so I can rock and move that cavity form out of the settling concrete. You'll see that later on. So we're ready to add a couple more bags of concrete. And for me, what I found is about 2 bags in the wheelbarrow, 60-pound bags. Seems to be an easier quantity to work with and mix. So, and then I've also read elsewhere, this is my first year working with concrete, is to coat the inside of the forms with, some people say linseed oil. I've seen some people use motor oil, so you research that and use what you think is proper. I've also done it without anything at all, but maybe this will allow it to settle down a little better and flow out to the sides and create a smoother edge than this. This isn't too bad, but see if we can get a little less aggregate showing, a little smoother finish, because we're going to expose about a couple inches of that above grade, kind of my lawnmower buffer. So let's throw some more concrete in and continue on. So I forgot to add that I did not pack this down real tight and float it smooth. I did that in one of my first pours, but what I found is that essentially that creates kind of a cake layer effect. So I want to dump as much concrete in as kind of like one pour, so I don't get that cold seam, those layers. And I'll use the shovel after I throw in on those other 2 bags and kind of tamp it in with the shovel, and that'll also kind of intermix it as well. So don't pack, don't smooth that down, because we want that stuff to intermix and interlock with itself. So we've got just under 5 bags in here now, and you can see how I use the shovel to kind of tamp it in and smooth it out or distribute the concrete. So it looks like we're going to need to probably mix up about another roughly a half bag and top that off, and then we can use a board and start screeding it, use our float to level it off, and eventually start a little troweling and do some edge work. Okay, we threw in not quite another half a bag, but so you can see we've got it kind of screeded off, leveled off, put the excess back in the wheelbarrow, and now you can see the water starting to bleed out. So we'll start doing a little trowel work in a little bit. And then again, we'll add these lag bolts to the cavity form to create some play and some movement and some clearance around that form as the concrete sets. Well, you can see we've added the lag bolts and started to work the cavity form loose. Or at least as the concrete sets, we'll continue to wiggle that around, pull it out as things firm up. I've been doing a little troweling, and there's still a lot of water bleeding out of it. This mixture is just a little runnier than the last few I've done. In fact, the last one was a little dry, and I had trouble getting a relatively smooth surface. So while that's been curing, setting up, I got all my tools washed, got the wheelbarrow all emptied out, cleaned up. So it's kind of a little waiting game now and finessing. Pretty soon, or as it sets up more, there you can see the water really reflecting. But as it sets up more, we'll take the edger and use this tool and go around the perimeter to give it a slightly rounded edge, kind of like what we've done on this one. And so the finish work for me is a little challenging, tedious, sometimes even frustrating, but we won't put a rounded edge around the cavity form because we want that to be a nice square sharp edge, so when we set the monument in, then it'll give us a nice, let's say, perpendicular or edging, and then we'll tamp in sand and finally seal it off with, I use a construction adhesive. So stay tuned. Well, this is kind of the slow, tedious part. You can see we're still pretty moist mixture here, still bleeding water, but we did take the first pass with the edger. Kind of rocking that cavity form back and forth and slowly lifting it up just a little bit at a time. Just want to make sure that that's got enough play, and as the concrete settles that we can slip that out. So right now it's just kind of a waiting game, and until that water bleeds off, we'll continue to trowel it smooth, see if we can get a nice, not quite a garage floor finish, but as close as we can, but something better than that brushed driveway. So we're on the home stretch. Well, we've been kind of, I have been putzing with this for probably the finish work a couple hours, but basically I'm ready to call it quits. Got it edged as best I can, fairly smooth, so hopefully we'll come back later tonight and pull the form, or maybe the cavity form, or maybe tomorrow morning. But so hopefully we'll end up with a good finished product, and Hope this video was helpful.